Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer. And yes, it really is me. Does not sound like me, but it is me. Obviously, my throat is a little bit cranky, but the show must go on. And we are so excited today to speak with our guest, Michael DeJager. So let me tell you again, first of all, welcome, Michael. How are you doing?
Doing so well. How are you doing?
Oh, well, aside from the fact that I sound like, I am a reject from, some movie about, you know, critters that you don't know how to speak. I don't know. We're just going to soldier on, as I said. So let me tell people a little bit about you, and then we will jump into this. So Michael DeJager
Wonderful.
leads the customer management practices events business. Boy, that's a mouthful. The customer management practice, or CMP for short, focuses exclusively on customer contact, customer experience, design, and innovation topics. Michael is a seasoned event producer, project and people manager with over 15 years of experience hosting domestic and international events across a wide variety of industries to include international trade, anti-corruption, commercial real estate, design, customer experience, and customer contact. His specialties include research, content creation, conference and event production, P&L ownership, event operations management, project management, people management, and public speaking. So again, Michael, welcome.
Thank you so much, Deb. It's such a pleasure to be here.
We're going to have a great chat. It might end up being a little one-sided, but that's okay. Tell us a little bit about how it is that you got to where you are today, and how did you discover that this is your passion in life?
That is a fantastic question. I feel like events have kind of followed me around my whole life, whether I was a kid hosting a little dinner party
Okay.
for friends and friends of parents and things like that, or being a part of a student organization when I was in sort of junior high and high school. Events kind of always followed me around. And I actually sort of cut my teeth in the events world with an organization I was a part of called Business Professionals of America when I was in high school. I took on some leadership roles with that sort of student-led trade association. And that's when I really started getting exposed to sort of large-scale events. They would have an annual conference every year that brought together about 5,000 students from across the US to compete on a variety of sort of competitive events. And then there was sort of a leadership track there as well, which was particularly interesting for me. So I ran for an office and ended up serving as the national president of that organization my first year of college, which was really fun. That involved traveling around, speaking at conferences, not necessarily the fanciest keynotes on the planet, but there was so much exposure there to sort of the magic of events and how it brings people together, and for all sorts of different purposes, but always in really interesting and meaningful ways. I think about some of the most interesting connections I've made in my life, and the events that either I've hosted or have attended have been like a solid backbone to that, which is really cool. I went to college in Denver and worked for a local trade association there that sort of acted as an international chamber of commerce called the World Trade Center Denver. It's part of the World Trade Centers Association in New York. I had fallen in love with New York when I remember vividly a trip out here when I was 11 years old. So I knew that I wanted to move to New York at some point in my life. And that's what I ended up doing. After 2 or 3 years working on international trade and business events in Denver, I moved to New York, and I looked at my sort of dossier of skills, and it turns out events were the common thread between sort of everything I had done in my life. So I continued sort of pursuing those. We were doing international trade and sort of compliance events, and a variety of sort of annual member gatherings and nonprofit events with the trade association in Denver. when I moved to New York, one of the sort of paths that I chose was the conference production business. There's a variety of different conference houses and media companies that live in New York and produce events all over the US and, of course, all over the world. So got exposed to commercial real estate out here for the first time, then went back to the international trade and anti-corruption business event space. And about 6 years ago is when I landed at the customer management practice, which has been where I produced some design events specifically around experience design and design thinking. And then most recently moved into our customer contact and customer experience portfolio of events. So yeah, events have interestingly sort of followed me around my entire career. And it's what I find is really interesting is there's an event for every sector, for every group of people. It doesn't matter how weird your personal interests might be, there's going to be an event community out there for you. I think there's very few things in life that are that transferable, which is really cool.
Right.
Yeah, I'd say that's me in a nutshell.
I love it. Okay, now I can't let it pass. Anti-corruption. You knew I was going to ask, right? So what the heck?
I know, right? So sort of a subset of a lot of the international businesses events is where I started to get exposure to that. So there's obviously a lot of different sort of trade compliance regulation that exists there. Mm-hmm. And sort of the banner as it relates to anti-corruption is the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which obviously we know of the FCPA probably being in the US. So it's all about not doing business with people that we as a country shouldn't be doing business with. And some of the events that I've done in the space were actually international events. So I was with the American Conference Institute at the time, which specializes in a variety of different sort of lawyer-y conferences. Mm-hmm. I don't have a lawyer-y background at all, but there was a lot of JDs that were actually the producers of the events there, given they were so technical. So I was definitely, I wouldn't say a duck out of water, but it was a very large learning curve to make sure that I was comfortable enough to produce on that topic. It's very interesting in the event production world because I always feel like kind of enough to be dangerous. Like I know the right questions to ask. And it's a skill set being able to pull sort of the key topics that people are really struggling with out of once you have research calls and speaker calls with 20 or 30 peeps. Right. You start to identify the trend lines in like what matters. And that could be in customer experience or it could be in the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act at the end of the day, which is quite interesting. But a lot of the events that I produced at the American Conference Institute, they touched more of the anti-corruption space. We did a pharmaceutical and medical device compliance congress in Panama. It was probably one of the coolest events I think I ever hosted. And it got together all of the local sort of nonprofit associations from Latin America and South American and Central American countries. Where there's not a like bona fide FCPA, for example, that like stretches across all of the countries. They come together as a community though and agree on
so they kind of have self-police.
Exactly right. They agree on standards that they all believe collectively make the most sense. And then that's sort of passed along across all of the countries as like, here's the gold standard. Let's work towards this, which I think is really interesting when you don't have necessarily this big international governmental body to control or have sort of policy and procedure in place. Yeah, it's more of like a self-policing moment. And the collaboration around that was such an interesting opportunity, I thought. Like we had simultaneous translation at this conference into Spanish and Portuguese. So we were going back and forth between all sorts of different languages. We had the original author of the guidelines that they were releasing basically an update to the guidelines at this event. So this was the forum for the launch of that. So it was cool to bring all of those different parties together to have a really sort of meaningful dialogue on it. So it felt not just that, of course, that we were ACI similar to CMP does for-profit events. So there's sort of the profitability piece of all of the for-profit events businesses, of course, but it really felt like we were kind of making a difference, bringing these different parties together in a forum that perhaps they wouldn't otherwise have in order to discuss this topic. So really interesting, as weird and like sort of dry as anti-corruption seems from a distance.
Oh, to me, it seems fascinating.
Yeah, exactly. Once you zoom in, it's like, okay, that's really actually pretty interesting. And it's like how it's all put together is quite interesting. I think for event professionals, you have to be curious, especially if you're on the event production side. Like, you need to be curious and interested to learn at all times, because that's going to give you enough exposure to be able to produce a really good event in that space.
Right. And event management truly is a very specialized skill set. And I've dabbled in it, and you have to be very creative. I mean, and so you're using that side of your brain, which I'm not remembering which side that is right now. But you also have to be really type A. Let's be honest about that, because especially big events. I mean, I have broken down events into 5-minute increments, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you are, you've got big speakers, you've got all these moving targets. And so being ultra organized is something that you have to be, but then you mix it with that creative side, and it's really a lot of fun.
It's true. It's like, it's kind of where the left and right brain connect in a lot of ways. I've never considered myself perhaps the most creative person around the block, but when I think about like the team members that I'm surrounded with, I think they add more of the creative juices to the rum punch, so to speak. Which is, and it really is cool then, as you can see sort of the different pieces of the event come together. And you're totally right in that you need like a nice double-decker toolbox of tools, different skill sets around the table. And a sort of killer event team really does have a little bit of this, a little bit of that, to get the right mix of skills around the table. And as events grow and sort of scale, it's also something you can never do alone. So it's important to have a team around the table that really is this well-oiled machine, all contributing in their own way, which is something that's really sort of magical to live and to see.
Right. Yeah. Any event that I've done, I always try and operate on what I call the hit by a bus theory. If something happened to me, could the event continue? Which means, you absolutely hit it on the head when you said it's the team. You have to have team members who can step up and say, here's what's going to happen. And then again, you have to be organized, documented. I learned the hard way to document things. And because we've worked with a lot of different venues, and I always tell people, y'all need to understand the venue is in it to make money, but they're not in it to be really bad people. So, so working with, say, hotel contracts and event, they're not nonprofits. They're not doing this.
They're running a business.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so, we always have to keep that in mind when we're negotiating. I'm actually in the middle of negotiating a contract right now for an event. And, it's very interesting because it's a give and take, but it's about, having those team, because the other thing that I think a lot of people forget is that venue then becomes part of that team.
Yeah.
Because if they're not going to cooperate, you're in big trouble.
100%. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. If the food quality is off at an event, it falls back on you as the organizer. If there's like logistical issues with communication, with, a room set or a room transition, that comes back on you too. So it is very important to view them as an extension of exactly who you are.
Right. So let's talk about the big guy in the room. Prior to, say, February of 2020, everything was going merrily along, right? And then thud. So first of all, tell us about how, what did you guys do the first, little bit of time, and then we'll really get into detail about how things have morphed since then in the event world, because it is a totally different world than it was in, say, January of 2020. Completely
agree with you. So my gosh, it was a wild adventure. So even looking back, when I was part of this trade associate, the student trade association, when I was in high school, we had a conference that was supposed to run in 2008, 2009 actually, that was going to be in Texas. Lo and behold, the swine flu had broken out there in 2009. So we ended up postponing the event for 1 month. So it was supposed to happen in June. We pushed it off to July. And we ended up being able to run it. The sort of like epidemic, it wasn't a pandemic, so it was much smaller. It ended up sort of blowing over. So when the beginning of the pandemic was beginning to rumble, everyone was talking about, like the coronavirus at that time. Hadn't even really branded it.
Yeah, in December we're thinking,
exactly right. So this isn't looking right.
Mm-hmm.
So even in like January and February, we hosted an event in January. We had another event in February, before March 2020
Mm-hmm.
hit. And I remember when it was like really starting to brew, I was like, you know what, this is going to blow over. It'll just be another, like another SARS, another
And it was only
swine
supposed to be
flu.
2 weeks. Remember that? It said 2 weeks.
Exactly. Right. That was the rhetoric.
Mm-hmm.
And my gosh, it was nothing like we ever expected, for sure. And that's true, I think, for all of us, no matter what industry you were in. Our like priority one was, okay, we have our business is also broken up by sort of revenue cycles. So understanding the quarters in which we recognize revenue, making sure that the business is healthy and has strong cash flow, all of that jazz. So those were like pieces of our consideration as well. We ended up postponing a lot of the events until the fall. So we took like basically March, April, May, and June events, and
you just shoved them. Yeah.
Exactly. Lifted and shifted them to sort of August and forward. We ended up running a smaller hosted buyer event that we had in March, which went well, but we did it 100% virtually, and we not really tried that before, especially with that particular format of event. And as the weeks went on and 2 weeks became 2 months, it started to become really apparent that we're not going to be able to do these in person at all anymore. And it's interesting because as the customer management practice, we have 3 different divisions. I'm the managing director of our events division. We have a research division, works on sort of syndicated research for our primary markets. And then we have a digital division, CMP Digital, and the flagship of that is Customer Contact Week Digital, as my T-shirt references. Customer Contact Week is our largest event. So we have our digital platform, which already ran pre-pandemic virtual events. I'd say they were quite simple, more like sort of streams of webinars where it's like you'd have access to a variety of different content.
And then you could go back and watch the recordings and
Exactly. So when we were trying to run Customer Contact Week in 2020, we had postponed it until August. When we found out that this isn't really going to happen anymore, we've got to figure out a way to do it virtually. We tried to really think out of the box and like answer the question of how we create this like immersive and interactive digital experience online that's more than just a little bit of content. Like, how can we meaningfully network in a virtual setting? How can we meaningfully connect buyers and sellers, our sponsors, with prospects? So what we ended up doing, which was wild looking back to it, and I'm sure some of our team have like PTSD from all of the work that went into it. We did 4 weeks, 3 days a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We went live and built a TV studio in our office.
Cool.
In New York. So Tuesday through Thursday, we would go live midday, like essentially 11 to 2. We bookended that with like the main stage keynotes, which would take place in the studio proper. And then there was opportunities where folks would break out and they would go to small group discussions, or maybe there would be a workshop with a sponsor. And we also had interactive environments where people could sort of more organically network, as well as sort of sponsor booths that were staffed during certain hours of the day. So it was quite the undertaking to pull off. And even one of the things that was probably the most startling is like how we take for granted the engagement that you get in in-person events. You can sort of build it
when you pass in the hall,
exactly.
Those type of things.
Right. And it's hard to sort of, similar to like losing the water cooler conversation in maybe a 100% remote work environment. Similarly, it's hard to get those like, just sort of happenstance conversations where you meet the most interesting people at events. So I think we did our best looking at that to try to put something together that led everyone to water. We certainly couldn't make them drink at the end of the day. So the engagement that we got wasn't bad. But my gosh, we had hoped for so much more, I think. But I think it's an important lesson in so much as it's like you got to trial things out and you got to test things. And I'm really like looking back at that August 2020, that entire month, what we were able to pull off as a team was really, really cool and something that we were super proud of. And it was something the market really needed at that time as
Mhm.
well. It's like that we were starting to get through the darkest days of the pandemic then,
Right.
where it's like we've been holed up for months at this
Mhm.
point, and there
Yeah.
was not
We
really a sign of
needed
that.
something. Mhm.
Exactly, exactly. So it was really good. I think one of the challenges with all digital events is everyone comes to the table with a little bit of a different, unique value
Mhm.
proposition of what they want out of the event. Maybe it's just this little bit of content, or maybe they're looking to meet someone really specific. And it's hard to deliver on those needs if the event is really large, I
Mhm.
think, on a virtual scale.
Right.
Not that it's not difficult as well in person, but people are just more present when they're in person, of
Mhm.
course, than a virtual environment where you're continually competing with the next email that hits an email box or the
Right. We
next sort
turn
of
our cameras off, and are we even still there? Mhm.
exactly who actually knows,
Mhm.
So I think that one of the important things looking ahead about virtual events is that you have to be really specific with the intention that you
Mhm.
want out of that event. And I almost think there's like the more specific that you can get, the more value it's going to be
Mhm.
for someone. The sort of general blue skies, evergreen topics, they don't
Right.
work as well there
Mhm.
because people are typically looking for quite specific outcomes
Mhm.
when it comes to a virtual event these days. Then looking at sort of the next steps, I guess, after the darkest days of the pandemic, we were one of the first to go back to live events. So the first event that we did back live was in June 2021,
Okay.
and it was a bootstrapped version of its former self for sure. And I would say that we really started to get back into the swing of things in the fall of
Mhm.
2021, and that's when we started to see a little bit more of the events bounce back. One thing that I will say, the most effective event format for us was our exchange business. So we have two different sort of key buckets of event formats
Mhm.
at CMP events. One of them being conferences. So it's sort of what you would expect from a larger scale event in so much as a trade show, expo booths, and then we've got a main stage that's really pretty, and then a lot of different breakout
Mhm.
content that we'll provide to people. Anyone can just pay to attend, buy a ticket to attend the
Mhm.
event, whether you're a buyer or a seller. And then, of course, we have sponsorships for our sellers in particular
Right.
to get an expo booth, maybe sponsor a case study
Mhm.
on at the event. Now, our exchange event, the model's a little bit different. It's a hosted buyer moment where we would typically cover travel expenses for qualified buyers that we identify specifically that need the solutions of our
Okay.
sellers. So a customer
So
contact week
you're
exchange.
really matchmaking.
Exactly right. That's the sort of backbone of the event
Mhm.
is meeting matchmaking, where folks have the opportunity to sort of rank who they'd like to meet on both
Okay.
sides of the
Okay.
fence. And then we also do a pretty in-depth profile of the attendees to understand, okay, in the next 6 to 12 months, maybe you need a new telephony solution for your
Mhm.
contact center, for example. Well, fantastic. Here are the providers that we have on site that would be good for you to meet with. And that was the most successful event format. I go back to it being really specific.
Mhm.
There wasn't any other forum where buyers and sellers were able to really meet in a meaningful
Mhm.
way, other than it's like a prospective buyer sort of hitting the phones and being like, I'd
Right.
like a meeting with this
Mhm.
person, this person, this person. So it was a very high value virtual event moment for us over the course of the pandemic because it provided an opportunity for someone who's sourcing a solution to meet with say 5 or 10
Mhm.
providers over the course of maybe two
Right.
days. Like you didn't have to schedule those meetings yourself anymore. Those were already scheduled for
Mhm.
you by our team. So that was like a super valuable format for us that sort of helped us weather through the pandemic. Of
Mhm.
course, like the hospitality industry generally was pretty much decimated
Mhm.
during especially 2020, the beginning of 2021. And I always viewed like the events businesses as sort of hospitality adjacent, were affected, but not necessarily directly.
Right.
In so much as we do have backups in our pocket. We have
Mhm.
our digital business for virtual
Mhm.
events.
Mhm.
We transferred a lot of our in-person events into more sort of robust interactive digital experiences. And then we also still have our research business as well. So we have a number of different revenue
Mhm.
streams that can kind of protect us during sort of the hurricane times of economic challenges or the likes of a pandemic. But that one in particular was it was a really fantastic one for us because we were able to offer some really, really unique and powerful value at the right time, I think.
Did you
So
continue that, or was that just kind of a one-off thing?
it's interesting. So the pendulum has 1,000% swung, and we've seen this even out of our digital events now, as well as we kind of burn that to the ground over the likes of a year and a half, maybe 2 years. So where all the engagement in the digital events 2020 and 2021 couldn't be bigger, we've seen that pendulum shift now back in 2022 and going into 2023. People are all in as it relates to engagement at our in-person events. And we've been struggling to get as much engagement, even as specific as we want to get, out of the digital side of the business. So our virtual exchange series, which was what was one of the sort of real survivor moments of the pandemic and offered a lot of value. We're back to in-person exchanges now. So the hosted buyer environment, benchmarking, executive level shtick in person now. But we even were trying to run them towards the beginning of 2022, and we just weren't getting the engagement out of them that we needed, because people would rather actually come live in person for 2 or 3 days and do that matchmaking live.
Yeah, it was interesting. I went to my first conference in January, of this year, and hadn't been to one, since 2020. Went to PodFest, of course, had to go to PodFest, and
I love.
And it was. My first thought was, oh my God, there's a lot of people here, because I went from nothing to 1,800, I think was about what they, and so shoulder to shoulder, and all of those things.
Wow.
But so freaked me out. I mean, it was just, I'm very social, but I'm still like, this is way too people-y for me. But the thing that and I loved online meeting. I mean, that's pretty much where I do all my networking now. Obviously, we do the podcast this way, all sorts of things. But the energy of being in person, I think, was what made the difference. And as you said, it's those chance meetings. Like one of the things that they did was, we had an evening where, there were things planned, but they said, hey, if you're interested in healthcare, we're going to kind of hold this little breakout session. And, in my other life, I have an initiative regarding cancer. And, so tying all of that together, and I went to that, and oh my God, it was worth the price of me going and being too people-y just for that 1 hour session, because, and I never, ever would have met any of those people if we hadn't been in person. And so I think that was definitely the benefit of being back in person.
Totally. I couldn't agree more.
And as it's that energy, but I love how you embraced what you did digitally for a while, because what I think we saw was so many things where people, they said, okay, we're just going to move it and do webinars, right? We were used to webinars. We've been doing webinars for as long as, we have been able to do them. But there was, as you said, none of that human interaction. There was, the speaker, there was the PowerPoint presentation, and, it worked for a little bit, but we had to have those small breakout sessions. We had to have all of those other things in order for things to be successful.
It's true. It's very, very true. Yeah. It's so hard to recreate those online. It's like, and I think that's a nut that none of us have really cracked. And I don't know if it's crackable either, because to come back to your point, there's something about the energy that you get in a room that helps to be a catalyst for these just one-off little connections. And a lot of times it's like we could produce the best content for an event. But you're totally right. And that industry specific lunch that I attended, or industry specific roundtable, maybe it didn't even have a topic, but that it gathered the right people there for you to make some really meaningful connections and have like a really meaningful conversation. Those are things that I think event professionals can't plan. I think they can curate an environment that will deliver a higher propensity of those style interactions. And that's something that we always try to really intentionally build into, especially the larger scale events where it might be more difficult to find your people. The hosted buyer events are, we typically would have, it's going to be no more than 100 people
Right.
on site, all in. So it's a little easier to navigate that. But when you're looking at maybe 3,000, a little over 3,000 people like you'd see at CCW Las Vegas, we do need to try to architect some specific moments where you can meet some of your people there.
Right.
Otherwise, you can kind of I always compare it to like being on a cruise ship. You might meet someone once, but you might not see them again for that
Right,
week.
because it's so big.
It's so big. So we want to make sure that any connections that you do make along the way are the most meaningful, the most targeted, the most curated, doing our best to sort of achieve that.
Right. And we can, as you said, we can do some of that online. We still do obviously a lot of things through C-Suite Network. We do virtual because we're all around the world, so we have to. And so one of there are several where we do, and we have breakout sessions. That's great. And I've met some really great people in those, but obviously it has to start out with a fairly small group.
Yep.
Otherwise, the poor administrator is just going to go bananas. But you get assigned to the groups. So it's, okay. I've been on ones where I knew nobody and ones where I knew everybody in there. And then we just chatted. I mean, all sorts of things. But that's the tricky part about those. And if you allow people to select, which you can, I mean, software, it's so interesting to see the evolution of software. I mean, we're on Zoom, and right now I've got, I think, 10 different things on the side that I could add to my, I don't even know what these things, what's a happy face? What the heck is the happy face? And those aren't, these are applications that they've added that I can, but, and so, you can select to be in a group, but, it's just, it's not going to work. And, I think one of the things that people had floated that, was an option that, and, I'll be interested in, what you say about this. We were going to have hybrid, right?
Yeah.
Did that ever really do anything?
That's a great question. If you'd asked me a year or two ago, and Michael, what's the future of events? I would have been like, hybrid is the way to go.
Because we thought that's great. If you want to be there, you can. If you want to sit at home without shoes on, you can. That's my big thing.
Exactly.
I don't want to put shoes on.
I understand. Totally understand. So we trialed quite a bit in this department back in 2021. I think the danger in hybrid events, especially when you're looking at something that's larger scale, is you're trying to be something for everyone, and you end up being kind of nothing for no one, which is so difficult. So one of the ways that we tried to sort of blend and deliver a little bit of both was by having our main stage specifically streamed out live. We just would do it via sort of YouTube. Sometimes we had bolted that and fed it through a virtual event platform. Sometimes maybe it was just public, or it pushed through like YouTube Live into a Zoom webinar. So it's like people could join. And then we took questions from the online audience. We would take questions from the room, and then we would take questions from the online audience. And this is when it was a relatively small cohort of folks on site, and most were attending virtually. That we were able to do, but since people weren't as engaged on site when a virtual question came through,
right? They all of a sudden looked at their phone, and
exactly. It's like people started to glaze over. I'm like, okay, well, we're trying to like level the playing field here, make sure that people are being seen on their channel. So that was, I would say it was fine. It could have been better. Looking at like how we deliver the rest of the event, a hybrid workshop next to impossible to do well, especially with the interactivity that you'd like to see.
Right.
A discussion group also next to impossible to do well, because, and I talk about this even when we're in like a hybrid working environment, I prefer being all in a room or all on Zoom, because regardless of the channel that you're in, you have a level playing field. When we start to have a few people virtual and a few people in the room, that is off kilter. Right. So people can't meet each other at the same level or feel that they can contribute on equal playing field then, which I think is inherently bad for the outcomes of a conversation. Like
Mhm.
somebody's always going to feel a little bit left out in
Right.
that environment. Um, so what we ended up having to do as a team is we had a team of people that worked on what was going to be the virtual event, and then we had a team of people that would be working on what would be the in-person event. The crossover of that would be relatively low. We would only cross it over on the highest value opportunities like the main stage, where
Okay.
it's like you could feel like you could have an eye
Mhm.
into the event. Um, Similarly, when it comes to like a sponsor, we would need someone from a sponsor staffing and supporting virtually, as well as them supporting the in-person
Right.
event,
Mhm.
like exhibit booth, for example.
Mhm.
So we would be asking the same.
Mhm.
And events organizations tend to run pretty lean to hit the profitability that we
Mhm.
want. And since events are so seasonal, it's not uncommon to have, a small lean team that might be a bit overwhelmed in the last couple of months of a
Mhm.
campaign through the delivery of the event, and then they would take a moment of rest. Um, but we would need a dedicated team, both from our side as well as our sponsors'
Mhm.
side, to make sure that attendees were really engaged in a meaningful way. The second part, which was really sort of the zinger of the entire production, is the cost to do this well is very, very, very high.
Hmm.
So you
Interesting,
need the
because a
best.
lot of people just assume, hey, it's like Zoom. You just turn on the camera.
It's very, very true. And I think what a lot of people don't consider is the AV requirements on site to do this well.
Ah.
You
Mhm.
need dedicated hard lines on absolutely
Mhm.
anything that has a Zoom
Your
connection on
tech
it.
has to be impeccable.
Your tech has to be impeccable. You also need dedicated technical support on every
Mhm.
single one of those rooms
Mhm.
to make sure that if there is an issue, you've got someone there readily
Mhm.
available who can triage it. Um, and simply, like, even if you look at the main stage production, you'll need someone who is pumping that out to a Zoom and monitoring
Mhm.
and staffing that. So that's
Mhm.
a unique staffing requirement um, as well. So between the sort of, I think a lot of event professionals, at least the way we've looked at it, is like sort of what's the cost value index
Mhm.
on this? It's like,
Right.
are we able to deliver the level of value that
Mhm.
we want, and to sort of rationalize the cost of what it'll take to get there. And we've never been in a position where we feel it's been worth it to
Mhm.
continue pursuing it. We'd rather do a digital event for the digital
Right.
audience.
It's the either
We'd rather,
or. Mhm.
it's an either or. I think that's how you can deliver the most value
Mhm.
to folks.
Right. Yeah, I love that it has come down to either or, because then we choose. And I like that concept of maybe the keynote where everybody can
Mhm.
do it. But
Yeah.
it's interesting because there's you mentioned Denver, and I hadn't caught this when I looked at your LinkedIn
Yeah.
profile. I'm from Colorado,
Oh,
and so I
nice.
actually still sit on the board of the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of Colorado.
Yeah.
And so twice a year we meet, and I pretty much do those via Zoom. That's
Mhm.
great. I'm not having to go back to Colorado for the weekend. We're back enough as it is, and all sorts of things. But so there's like five of us usually that are
Yeah.
Zooming. And so they've got,
Mhm.
it's really funny. I mean, they've shown pictures. So they've got the big screen with the PowerPoints and then our five pictures on the
Uh-huh.
side. So that's always entertaining. We're like, you got to pay attention to what you're doing, no drifting off or scratching or doing those things because you're up on the big screen. But,
Exactly.
then we've got this room of board members who, when they speak, you don't know who's talking,
You don't know.
and so then we're in here typing, who's talking, what are they saying, can we can't hear them, and
Mhm.
all of these various things. So it ends up being, it's great in some ways, but in other ways, as you said, it is a logistical nightmare. And so I mean, it's a challenge, and I think good organizations are obviously figuring out how to do it,
Yeah.
and and are able to say, okay, you stand here when you speak,
Right.
or all of these various things. And we've done that at in-person events anyway. Don't ask a question until we get a microphone to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Things just as simple as that. But it's interesting how tech is really evolving. I mean, like we said, it's just incredible, and it had to do it overnight. I mean, that
Yeah.
really was the thing. We were kind of, well, we could do this. And it was like, oh, you know, um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, what are some other tech things that you have seen, both for in person or virtual, that have really jumped up in the last couple of years?
A great question. And it's really interesting. I think the events business as sort of an institution, and this doesn't matter if you do B2B or B2C events, if you do sort of nonprofit events, I think the tech for events has always been a bit lackluster,
Mhm.
genuinely. AV in production is one thing to make
Right.
something that's really, really beautiful.
Mhm.
And there's so much
We can
out
do
there.
PowerPoint slides, right?
Exactly, right? Um, but when I think about like the internal technology for a company that produces events of various sizes, for it to be able to really effectively support the event,
Mhm.
it's it can be really, really difficult. I was mentioning that events organizations run lean. A lot of times we're working out of a bunch of Excel spreadsheets when we could be working out of a more you know sophisticated
Right.
database
But
when
it's
it
kind of, if
comes
it's
to.
not broken, why fix it type of thing.
Exactly, right. So I think the mindset has, especially since the pandemic, it's begun to accelerate about the value that effective technology, I
Mhm.
think, can add to events. Post pandemic, we've definitely been prioritizing sort of our digital customer journey, knowing that all organizations really do need to be digital first, and that includes all event
Mhm.
interactions as well, making sure that that's a really integrated experience. I mean, we're the business to business conference business in particular is one that still lives off of like telesales, outbound,
Mhm.
like it's very vintage when it comes down to even the sales
Mhm.
methodologies that we employ. So and this is a platform that we installed shortly after the pandemic. It's branded as an event experience ecosystem. It powers our website, it powers the event mobile app,
Mhm.
and that experience is connected across our website. You get a My Account once you register. You can begin building your agenda. um, I think probably the number one priority is to make sure that your tech stack from like a backbone perspective is
Right.
as strong as possible. And now, granted, we still have lots of integration challenges that every organization does, where the silos of different technology struggle to interact the way that we want them to.
Somebody's
But I
like,
think
but
that
I have a Mac. Oh.
it's great, fantastic, exactly.
Mhm.
So there's definitely that piece of like getting the underlying tech stack right for your organization, I think is really important. It's interesting when I look at our conference business, that's one platform. When I look at our exchange business, the hosted buyer moment, that's a different platform. We use Visibo for our conferences. We use a platform called Eventsair for our exchanges. Both of them are their own sort of unique digital experience and mobile app. Visibo it specializes more in this sort of sleek end-to-end experience, especially when it relates to like organizing large agendas or understanding and digesting a lot of sponsors, different filters, tags, things like that. And it's generally a very beautiful event ecosystem from a digital perspective. The Events Air solution, one of the things that it's really specialized in is the platform for the one-to-one business meetings and matchmaking. It's sort of a semi-automated platform that helps to do a level of matchmaking for you, while also taking into consideration the specific meetings that people want on both sides
Mhm.
of the spectrum. That all manifests into a mobile app on site. So at any time you can refresh your meetings agenda
Mhm.
and see the meetings that you have sort of up
Mhm.
next. And those platforms are both unique in so much as they don't deliver each other's value, which is
Okay.
really interesting. So we're kind of looking at a semi-unique tech stack depending on the format of event that we're delivering, since similarly to us, we can't be everything to everyone. Neither can, the technology platforms. Taking a step back about like some of the things that tech can really do for events and that we've, I think, started to dabble in, but we haven't really realized the maximum value from it. One is really the personalization that you can achieve, I would say, with having the right customer data in the right place at the right time. It goes back to some of the failed integrations, I think, across like the end-to-end experience, maybe for our view of our customer. But how cool would it be to be able to know enough about an attendee and know about their investment priorities to suggest sessions for them to attend? Or, my gosh, this is a hosted buyer event. We
Mhm.
know that you love a lemon drop. there's
Right.
going to be a lemon drop ready for you at the bar because we know based on what you love online, you love a lemon drop.
Hmm.
Um, and it's a bit of a blend between personalization and the power I think that generative AI is having on
Right.
modern
Hmm.
technology. It's like if you could stack those on top of each other. It's
Hmm.
what could we learn and know about our attendees, and what could we proactively deliver for them?
Hmm.
When I think about the moments that I'm always the most excited about in events, it's when something unexpected wows me.
Hmm.
You know, those are the moments I think that stick with me and
Hmm.
last at events. It's not a few words from the keynote. It's not necessarily the expo hall experience. It's the moments that stick out to me that were unique. And I think as organizers, there's you can have different moments like that that are happenstance across an event, of course, but we can be more intentional with
Hmm.
that. My gosh, you could turn someone who likes CCW into someone who is in love with the brand
Right.
and
They're
has
going to
a
be your
really,
best
really
ambassadors.
exactly. So delivering, I think that personalization is really, really, really cool. And at a really large scale, I think generative AI could provide so many benefits.
Hmm.
One of the ways that I think about is live assistance during an event,
Right.
where I would love to have a chatbot solution that's actually really effective
Hmm.
and has a personality and can answer dynamic questions
Hmm.
about an event. Like, when is XYZ speaking? Fantastic. XYZ is speaking in this room at this
Hmm.
time. We recommend that you go there. And oh, by the way, it's probably a good topic for you because you're also in healthcare
Hmm.
and the topic is aligned with your investment priorities. If we could connect all those historically disparate
Hmm.
dots on your map of like what's important to you at an event, we would be able to deliver value at an event that is at a whole other level.
Right.
So I think the bigger the event, the harder it is to mine the value
Hmm.
that you need as an individual out of it. And to be able to, with some automation, provide a path through that event that makes sense for
Hmm.
someone, that would be such a huge achievement for us as
Right.
organizers. And to be able to do that at a personalized level, it takes a lot with the evolution of a program. And that comes down to effectively tagging and having up to date
Hmm.
information across the entire
Hmm.
platform. But that also needs to that's the axis. The y axis is knowing enough about our customers and being able to deliver the value for them at the
Right.
right time.
Hmm.
So I think when it comes to the future potential of events, that's the future. Super hyper
Hmm.
personalization, whether it's powered by generative AI or not. And then as well as sort of a support solution for the event that is automated and could deliver higher value, more personalized response and direction to
Hmm.
how someone could garner value from an
Right.
event.
Right. I love this, and I love the thought of AI. And I'm not, I'm one of these people. I like AI. I don't use
Yep.
it nearly as much as I should or could.
Same.
Um,
Yeah.
but it to me, it's so cool. So you were talking about that the app, and
Yeah.
Podfest was the first big thing that I had attended where we had an app. So that was great, and obviously all of it is geared towards how the person initially sets it up, because
Yeah.
we don't want to be too intrusive. So
Exactly.
I could put in there, okay, here's my Facebook, here's my LinkedIn, here's so then it could start, and if I thought, okay, Facebook is only personal, I don't want, then I
Yep.
wouldn't link it in.
Right.
And obviously everybody's or should put in their LinkedIn,
Yeah.
and things like that. But and I'm also a big person that you put a little bit of your personal in
Yeah.
LinkedIn so people get
We're
to know
human.
you a little bit, right? But so here I am at Podfest, and they ran probably 10 concurrent sessions at a time. Now
Mm-hmm.
each one was broken out into, say, financial, technical, I mean, all sorts of things. But I'd look at that schedule, whether it was the printed one, because then I could write on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or, online. And after about three, I'd go, ah. you know?
Yeah.
Or I just would go, okay, I only care about the financial one. So that's all I'm going to go to. And then later on, somebody would say, oh my gosh, you missed X.
Right. Which is the
And
worst thing to hear at an event.
I know you're like, oh no, especially when they go, you're like, well, okay, can I watch the recording? Oh, it was, whatever. But yeah, so if AI could have gone in and said,
Mm-hmm.
okay, she cares about healthcare, even though it's not anywhere else in her thing, we're going to direct her to here, or more importantly, she needs to go talk to X person.
Yes.
Things like that. And again, some people are going to go, oh my God, that's intrusive. Fine. Then you have that option to turn that off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so that's not a huge deal, but yeah, especially when you've got these large events, whether they're online or in person, they just get overwhelming. And so if you can start tying in through social, all of those various other things, then have AI start gleaning through. That's going to be where the value comes in.
It's true. Yeah. And to your point, we rely a lot on what people are willing to give us, I think, and we don't want to be intrusive.
Right.
So yeah, someone's profile on the app is kind of limited to the information that they provide. The flip side of that, you can use generative AI to append industries on everyone based on the company that they're coming from, or append company size, or make some conjectures on contact center size. For example, when I think about the different ways to convene crossroads of attendees at events, a lot of the things are actually, it's things that we could figure out on our own about any given person with a little bit of research. Now, can we do that for our hosted buyer events for 50 peeps? Yes, absolutely. Sure. Easy peasy. Can we do it for a large scale of event of 3,000 people? Nope.
Right now, no. But in a year, who knows?
Exactly. Right now, we could really be investing in how to profile these people in a way that still you could toggle on or off your sort of run, Forrest, run or stop sign. But we would have all the infrastructure there to really be able to suggest people for you to meet. There's another event platform when it comes to technology and networking, which is an interesting one. It's called Brella. I have not used it specifically before, but I know people from our parent company have. And when I was talking about the different styles of events and the tech stacks that can effectively power them, this is another unique value proposition. The backbone of that piece of technology is the networking component. So Umbrella-powered event, what it typically does is it has zones that might be a bunch of cocktail rounds that have numbers 1 through 20 at them, and it's in a room. And the locus of the technology is about, you meet this person at this table at this time based on their profiles.
Kind of a little speed dating type of thing.
Exactly. It's a tech platform with the backbone being like a speed dating networking moment, which is so interesting. What I haven't seen out there is a solution that does all of these things well at the end of the day either. So that's why we're always using different technologies for different event formats to try to like hit that sweet spot of the value that we need to deliver with that tech at the right time. It's really interesting.
Right. And the cool thing about all of this is then it can continue. I mean, the app that we use for PodFest, now I haven't gone back in recently, but I'm still getting pings from it.
Yeah,
and so whether it's, people are saying, hey, we're forming this small group, or, hey, we're going to talk about doing this next year. Would you be interested? All of those. But I have gone back in and searched for people who attended to say, okay, hey, I'm doing this now. Would you be interested in it? We were both at PodFest, didn't have a chance to chat with you, but totally. I'm planning to attend next year. So, in about November, I'll start using it to network in advance, which Absolutely. Is what we do on LinkedIn, right? But now we're going to use it because we know, okay, they have at least signed up for the app for PodFest. So we know, hey, they're probably going to attend. Therefore, let's be talking to them in advance. And again, if you can use AI to start doing those matchmaking in advance, I mean, that's perfect.
Hugely perfect. It's true. Another like tech piece that I think is a bit underutilized, especially at large events, is the power of like geolocation too. Understanding where you're at an event venue. This is another one where it's like most of these solutions are bolt-on add-ons to the sort of core solution that you might be using from a tech provider perspective. But like I think about, I'm sure PodFest had a level of booths or exhibits. How many exhibits were there?
There really weren't as many as I was expecting. And so there were maybe 30 at the most.
Okay, gotcha. Which is a reasonable amount
Right.
to, that's a reasonable number to digest and work through. Some of our smaller, even CCW events have sort of that 30 to like 50, 60 booth range. Our large scale event in Vegas, it had 185 exhibit booths
I went
this
to
year.
CES one time. Okay, I still have
That's the next
PTSD,
level.
right?
CES, PTSD, yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
the Consumer Electronics Show is no joke. And that, I mean, it's like trade show as trade show can be.
Right. But what it did was you met nobody.
Exactly,
Yeah,
right. And
because
that's
you were just
awful.
like, yeah. I mean, it was so overwhelming that
Right.
you really did not meet anybody.
Absolutely. And so I think about even from an exhibits
Mhm.
perspective, it's like, how can we add more value there?
Right.
Obviously, with the hosted buyer events that we
Mhm.
have are very, very valuable because
Mhm.
it is doing a level of
Right.
personalization for you.
Yeah, you've got
That's
warm
all,
leads that are coming out of that, or even better.
exactly. And then I like the next layer of it is, okay, we have this profile based on what we know that you want or who we know that you are. Okay, well, now you tell us, you tell our generative AI chatbot, give me the top 5 providers for contact center as a service that I should meet at this event.
Mhm.
Fantastic. Here are the top 5
Mhm.
providers. They specialize in your industry, by the way.
Yeah.
And here is walking directions,
Mhm.
waypoints in our exhibit
Yeah,
hall.
because you're going to get lost otherwise, right?
You're going to get lost otherwise, right? So we recommend you go here, then here, then here. That's the most effective way to
Mhm.
navigate this floor. How valuable is that? That's
I know.
amazing. It would be
Mhm.
so, so good. The reality is, all of the nuts and bolts exist out
Right.
there. It's really hard to put it all together in
Mhm.
a tech stack that's going
Mhm.
to be able to deliver value
Mhm.
consistently, I think, at this juncture.
Right. Yeah, because as you mentioned, I mean, that you start putting all that's a logistics issue from just the
Yeah,
people who are going to coordinate it and manage it.
right.
Because the
And then
worst thing is if say you send people to the wrong place, and they're like, well, why am I going to use it? Because then they're going on social. Don't do this, don't do this. So it's got to work perfect. Or if
yes,
not,
yes,
have
indeed.
fun. Hey, it sent me to
Exactly.
the bar instead, but that was okay.
That's all right. If we don't have an answer for you, we'll just send you to the
Mhm.
bar. That's a great idea. Yeah, it's true. No good deed goes unpunished for
Mhm.
sure. We want to make sure that when whenever we decide to pull something off, we want it to be really. It's got to be
Mhm.
delivered at a high level. It's
Right.
got to be delivered at a high level.
Right. Yeah, I mean, how many times now are we doing things? And like we said, we've now been doing this for several years where we're doing, online things. And
Mhm.
and we're like, they still haven't figured out how to run Zoom. Or,
Sorry, let
and
me
they're
unmute
the event
myself.
manager. They still can't figure this out, really.
Right.
But so, and then you start thinking about other things. Then you're not paying
Yeah.
attention. And so
Right.
and things happen.
Yeah.
It's just like your host has no voice, things like that. But there are things that happen. And so of course the plan is, like I was saying at the very, very start, you have backup plans.
Yeah.
Okay, so if this doesn't work, here's what we're going to do. Maybe
Mhm.
our tech isn't going to work to broadcast, so we're going to have somebody with their smartphones that are going to record it, and then we're going to, so it'll go out several days late, but people will still get the video, all of
Right.
those things. So you can do this, folks, but it is confusing. And so tell us a little bit more about exactly what customer management practice does and what are the services that you provide.
Absolutely. So the
Yeah, I got a
mission
segue down. You can tell this. I've done this before, right?
Certainly so. I love it. At a high level of customer management practice, the backbone of our portfolio is Customer Contact Week currently.
Mm-hmm.
The event's been around since 1999. So it was founded in 1999 by a bunch of call center managers who were trying to benchmark and learn a
Mm-hmm.
little bit more. And we celebrated 25 years this year, which is super exciting. And now it's this super large scale event property that is one of the industry leading events for customer contact executives, whether you're looking to network and benchmark or to source new solutions for your contact center and customer service operation. Our business unit, I had mentioned sort of our events, research, and digital businesses. Those are sort of the 3 legs of our stool at CMP, all with the shared mission of serving people who have customers, which is most of us in some way, shape, or form, whether you're B2B, B2C, whatever industry you're in. We feel we can offer you value about how you can take your customer experience to the next level. That might be how the customer experience is designed on the front end. It could be the data and analytics and the people are crunching the numbers over the entire picture, or it could be the customer service experience, which is often owned by the contact center. But we sort of view all of this as different pieces of the customer life cycle. Our events business delivers primarily in-person events to help connect people in a variety of different ways. We have our conference business and our exchanges, different event formats for different folks and depending on their priorities. We have our digital business, which is primarily a lead generation source for a lot of our key partners and sponsors that also partner on the live events. The format there is online events, webinars, white papers, thought leadership, and a variety of sort of editorial news content for the customer contact and CX space. All of those sort of opportunities are folks where buyers could attend or subscribers can attend free of charge, no cost for them. And then sponsors deliver a variety of content. We deliver original content as well. Then our research business is primarily focused on the customer contact space right now, but the research and advisory services business is looking primarily at our customer contact audience and seeing what unique research-based value, similar to a Gartner or Forrester, can deliver for them, very specific for the customer contact space. So right now, one of the primary products out there from our research division is all about how to engage and retain agents in the contact center in a hybrid world, and the various personas of agents and how they should be managed and treated differently and uniquely to engage them effectively across hybrid and remote working environments. So each of the sort of three pieces of our business, events, digital, and research, they each contribute in their own way to our overarching mission of helping turn customers into really raving fans of your brand. And we're here to give you the toolbox of how to do that.
Perfect. So how do they find you?
So customermanagementpractice.com is a great place to start. That's sort of the main point that will pull you to different pieces of the business. For our digital business, it's ccwdigital.com, Customer Contact Week Digital. And then you can always find us on customercontactweek.com as well. That's our CCW Las Vegas website. And they're all different pieces of the business sort of convene there. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. It's just my name, Michael DeJager. Would love to connect with you all there.
Perfect. I love it. Well, this has been absolutely fascinating because, like I said, I do events to a much smaller scale. And yeah, here's the weird thing. I do dog shows. I manage dog shows. You talk about when you were talking about niches, and
exactly.
So there are events for everything. So, Michael, this really has been so much fun. And, I would love to have you on again when technology changes and evolves again to talk about more things. So we will definitely plan on that. But until then, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
Yeah. I think that especially with the pandemic, we've talked about digital interactions. It's all digital. It's all in person. The reality is no matter how events are delivered, or events are definitely sort of here to stay. They're not going anywhere. And the engagement that we've seen in our events since the pandemic has been at an all-time high. And I'm not even talking about like in numbers, which is also quite true, but in the engagement, like people want to be there, which is so exciting. So in terms of like a final thought, I think we should never undervalue human connection at these events and those happenstance meetings. Never take those for granted. My gosh, I feel like we felt that during the pandemic where, wow, we really did take those moments for granted. So as you engage in events, look for those moments that are sort of a wow for you. And I hope some of those wow moments have to do with the one-to-one human connections that you make, and never undervalue that.
I love it. So much fun. Well, I am Deb Creer. I've been having a fascinating discussion with Michael DeJager of the Customer Management Practice. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.